The grand hall shimmered with golden chandeliers, the scent of fresh roses and expensive perfume filling the air. Laughter and whispers of excitement echoed off the marble walls as guests took their seats, dressed in their finest attire. It was a wedding straight out of a dream, elegant, extravagant, and attended by the crème de la crème of society. Cameras flashed, capturing every moment, every smile, every stolen glance between the bride and groom's family. I stood at the altar, my suit pristine, my tie perfectly knotted. Every detail of this day had been meticulously planned, down to the color of the napkins on the reception tables. It was supposed to be perfect, our day. My hands were steady, my expression calm, but inside there was an uneasy stirring. I couldn't quite place. And then Sophia appeared. She was breathtaking. The lace of her gown clung to her frame, her veil cast, skating like a waterfall of silk. The entire room stilled, captivated by her beauty. Her eyes met mine, and for a brief moment I felt reassured. Whatever doubts had plagued me before faded. This was my bride, the woman I had chosen. Then her mother stepped forward. Margaret had always been a force of nature, imposing, elegant, and utterly self-absorbed. From the moment I proposed to Sophia, she had made it clear that she would always be involved, always have a say. And yet I had convinced myself that once we were married, we would carve out our own lives, separate from her influence. That illusion shattered in an instant. Margaret's sharp eyes scanned the room before fixing on me. "You're in my seat." The words were low, but in the silence of anticipation they might as well have been shouted through a megaphone. I frowned, confused. Her seat? This was my wedding. The seat beside Sophia was meant for me. "Excuse me," I said, my voice, even she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes move. A murmur rippled through the guests, heads turning, whispering. I remained still. This wasn't happening. Not here, not now. "I'm not moving," I said, my voice firm. Sophia's face twisted in panic. She turned to her mother, then back to me. Just do it," she whispered under her breath. "Please." I looked at her, really looked at her, and that feeling, the unease, became something sharp and unmistakable. "No," I said. Margaret's face darkened, her polished veneers slipping for a fraction of a second before she regained control. But Sophia snapped before I could react. Her palm struck my face. A loud, resounding slap cut through the silence. Gasps erupted. A few guests stood in shock. Others whispered, some shifting awkwardly in their seats. The cameras caught it all. I did not move. Sophia's chest heaved, her hands trembling at her sides. Her eyes were wild. A mix of anger, desperation, and something else. Fear. "Apologize," she demanded. My cheek burned. But the sting wasn't just physical. It was the humiliation, the sheer disbelief that my bride, the woman who had sworn to love me, had just publicly disrespected me. In front of hundreds of people, I glanced at her mother standing tall, a small victorious smirk on her lips. And in that moment everything became clear. I had ignored too much the way Sophia never stood up to her mother, the way decisions about our future had always gone through. Margaret first, the way I had never truly been the priority. I was just another piece in their perfect little puzzle. The weight of realization settled in my chest like a stone. I adjusted my suit, straightened my time, took a slow, measured breath. Then, with a calmness that silenced the entire room, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. The sound of my footsteps on the marble floor was drowned out by Sophia's hysterical sobbing. Margaret's voice rose in anger, berating her daughter. Guests scrambled to process what had just happened, some filming, some murmuring, some sneaking out before the drama got any worse. The wedding was over before it had even begun. As I walked out of the grand hall, the sounds of gasps, murmurs, and muffled sobs trailed behind me. The weight of the moment hadn't fully settled, but the decision had already been made. My face still burned from the slap, but the sting wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something that gwed at my pride, my dignity. The cool evening air hit me as I stepped outside, loosening my tie with a sharp pull. My car was parked just beyond the grand entrance where rows of luxury vehicles gleamed under the golden glow of the venue's lights. A valet rushed toward me, but I waved him away. I needed to be alone. Just as I opened the car door, my phone buzzed. My best man, Kevin. I hesitated before answering. "Are you out of your damn mind?" His voice was a mix of disbelief and concern. "You just walked out of your own wedding. She slapped me in front of hundreds of people," I said, evenly gripping the steering wheel but making no move to drive. "Kevin, sigh, yeah, I saw that. Everyone saw that." There was a pause. Then he added, "But man, this is huge." I didn't need to check my phone to know what he meant. Social media, live recordings, photos. The wedding that was supposed to be a perfect union had turned into a public spectacle, a disaster. "What's happening in there?" I asked, though I wasn't sure if I even cared. Kevin exhaled loudly. Sophia collapsed, full-on breakdown. Margaret's losing her mind, yelling at everyone. Guests are taking sides. Some think you should have just apologized and gone through with it, but most think she crossed the line. I closed my eyes. Of course there were people who would say I should have apologized, that I should have swallowed my pride, let it slide and taken my place next to my bride. But what kind of man would that have made me? A weak one? A man who would have spent the rest of his life bending to Margaret's? Will, a man who would have always been second, always been expected to make sacrifices for someone else's comfort. I wasn't that man. I never would be. Kevin spoke again. "Dude, Margaret just tried to take the mic. Security had to step in." That almost made me laugh. Almost. "I don't care what she says," I muttered. "I'm done. Are you sure?" Yes. A long silence followed before Kevin spoke again. "Then I'll handle things here. You just..." He stopped. "Damn. You should probably turn your phone off. Man, it's everywhere." I didn't need more details. I ended the call and did exactly that. Shut my phone off, tossed it onto the passenger seat, and let my head rest against the steering wheel for a moment. I just breathed. The night stretched before me like an open road, uncertain, unexpected, but mine. Then, without another glance at the venue, I started the car and drove away inside the wedding hall. Chaos erupted. Sophia sat on the floor, her white dress pooling around her like a fallen angel. Tears streamed down her face, mascara smudging as she let out shaky sobs. "I didn't mean to," she kept repeating, her voice broken. "I didn't mean to." Margaret's voice boomed over the chatter. "Get up, Sophia, this is humiliating!" Her mother stood above her, eyes blazing, hands clenched into fists. Her perfect, composed exterior had cracked, revealing the rage beneath you. "Let him humiliate you." Margaret hissed, pulling Sophia up roughly by the arm, "and you let him leave." Sophia shook her head, her lips trembling. I didn't think he'd actually..." "You slapped him, Sophia," her father James cut in, his deep voice, carrying across the hall. He had been silent until now, watching everything unfold with barely concealed disappointment. He ran a hand through his graying hair. his jaw tight. What the hell did you expect? Sophia flinched, her lower lip wobbling. I was just upset. He should have listened. He should have. He should have left you. The moment your mother tried to control him, James said coldly. Margaret whipped around, eyes flashing James. No, he snapped. Enough. This is on you, Margaret. You've spent years making her think she could have everything exactly the way you wanted it. You raised her to believe that your word was law. Well, guess what the man she was supposed to marry? He's not like us. He wasn't going to bow to you. Sophia sucked in a breath, staring at her father in shock. Margaret's face darkened, but James wasn't finished. He gestured to the guests who were still watching, whispering, filming this. He pointed to the scene. This is what you've done. You've ruined our family's name, and you, he turned to Sophia, ruined your future. Sophia broke down completely. But Margaret, even in the face of disaster, wasn't willing to admit defeat. This isn't over, she hissed, eyes narrowing. He'll come back. James let out a short, humorless laugh. If you really believe that, you're more delusional than I thought. Meanwhile, social media erupted. Mobile phone with arrow trending. Now runaway groom. The slap wedding, respect is earned. Police scar, light breaking news. The most extravagant wedding of the year ended in shock as the bride slapped the groom just before the vows. Watch the full clip here. Eyes. Speech balloon comment section at The Real Diva, and she lost a good man for what? Skull at Money moves only. I would have left too. Respect goes both ways. 100 points at Toxic King 69. Why do I feel like the mom is the real villain here? Eyes at Feminine Queen. He should have sucked it up. A slap, isn't that? Serious face with rolling eyes at Mr. No Nonsense. Bet she's regretting it now. I parked my car by the beach. The waves crashed against the shore, a soothing rhythm in contrast to the storm I had just walked away from. For the first time in months, I felt free. I didn't know what would happen next, how the world would spin my name into their narratives, how Sophia would handle the aftermath. But none of that mattered, because for once I wasn't fighting for control. I had already won. I disappeared. No calls, no texts, no explanations, just gone. The world outside raged on. Headlines, viral clips, speculation. But I refused to be part of it. After leaving the wedding hall, I drove until the city lights faded in my rearview mirror. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay where people could find me. So I chose silence. A secluded resort on the coast became my hiding place, a world far removed from the chaos I had left behind. The staff knew nothing about me, and that was exactly how I wanted it. No one whispered my name here. No one pitied me. No one cared. For the first time in years, I could breathe. But while I embraced the silence, Sophia fell apart back in the city. She was in ruins. Her messages flooded my phone. Hundreds of unread texts, dozens of missed calls, each one more desperate than the last. Please pick up. I need to talk to you. I made a mistake. Please let me explain. I love you. Don't do this to me. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Everyone's turned against me. Please, I just need to hear your voice. Her last message had come 2 days ago. Are you really never coming back? I had no answer. The world had seen her for who she was, entitled, explosive, unapologetic. Now, without me to shield her, she was drowning. Social media tore her apart. The bride who slapped her groom, the slap wedding, is still trending. A relationship expert went on live TV and said, "Any woman who slaps her husband before the vows doesn't deserve the wedding." People started making memes about her. Some were bad, others were brutal. She had come a joke, and even her father wanted no part of it. James had been publicly silent, but behind closed doors he made his feelings clear. He distanced himself from his own daughter, refusing to defend her actions. Even the wealthy families who had once respected them now whispered about the scandal. Deals were quietly pulled away. Partnerships suddenly canceled. Sophia wasn't just heartbroken, she was ruined. But Margaret was different. She still refused to admit defeat. She told everyone that I was weak, that I had overreacted, that if I had been a real man, I would have understood that Sophia had only lashed out in stress. Her interviews were carefully orchestrated. She never apologized, never admitted that her interference had driven me away. Instead, she called it a misunderstanding, telling reporters that I would come back once I had calmed down. Margaret thought I was still part of her game. That was her mistake. Kevin was the only one who knew where I was. He called, but I rarely answered when I did. He always had something new to report. "Dude, Sophia's still spiraling," he said one evening. "I don't think she's left her apartment in days." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the waves crashing against the shore. Not my problem. She's miserable, man. I took a sip of my drink, letting the cold liquid burn down my throat. That's not my problem either. Kevin exhaled into the phone. "You really don't care, huh?" I was silent for a moment. I don't know what I feel, because the truth was I did care, or at least I had. I had loved her. I had planned a future with her. I had ignored all the warning signs because I thought love could fix everything. I was wrong. "She's still trying to call you," Kevin added. I sighed. "I know, and Margaret's out there pretending like nothing happened. She even said in an interview that you're just taking some time and that you'll be back soon." I smirked at that. Then she's in for a shock. Kevin chuckled. "Yeah, I figured as much." He hesitated, then said, "Look, man, what happens now?" I had been avoiding that question because I didn't know. All I knew was that I was never going back. Sophia had crossed a line, and once that line was crossed, there was no one doing it. I wasn't just taking time to think. I was making peace with the fact that the life I had planned was over, that Sophia and I were over, that there was no fixing this ever. And the sooner she realized that, the better. Because I had no intention of answering her calls, no intention of responding to her texts, no intention of ever looking back. I had ghosted her, and that wasn't going to change. The ocean breeze was different. At night it was calmer, quieter, carrying only the soft hum of waves rolling against the shore. I sat on the wooden deck of the small beachfront village I had rented, staring at the dark horizon, letting my mind drift. The past few days had been a blur, a mixture of silence, long walks, and an avoidance of anything that reminded me of her. But avoidance could only last so long because the truth had finally caught up with me. I had been blind. Maybe I had always known deep down that something wasn't right. Maybe I had ignored the warning signs because I wanted so badly to believe that Sophia and I were different, that we were more than just another power couple, another business deal disguised as love. But love was supposed to feel effortless, and ours never had. It had always been a fight to prove myself, a fight to be seen, a fight against the presence that had been lurking over our relationship from the beginning. Margaret, The more I sat with my thoughts, the clearer it became. Sophia had never been in control. She had never made a single decision without her mother's approval. Every aspect of our relationship had been shaped by Margaret's opinions, her expectations, her silent, looming influence. And the few times Sophia had tried to stand on her own, Margaret had always pulled her back in. I thought back to all the moments I had dismissed as small things. The way Sophia always asked for Margaret's input before we made any big decisions. The way her mother micromanaged our engagement party, deciding who was invited and even choosing Sophia's dress. The way Margaret had forced her way into our wedding planning, treating it not as a celebration of love, but as a business event. And then there was the most obvious sign of all. The moment Margaret demanded I vacate my own seat at my own wedding, and Sophia had slapped me for refusing. That was when it clicked. I had spent months telling myself that Sophia was different from her mother, but that wasn't true. Sophia had been raised to believe that Margaret's word was law, and when I refused to bow down, she had reacted the only way she knew how, by trying to put me in my place. I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my jaw. This wasn't love. It had never been love. It had been controlled, disguised as commitment, a power play that I had only now begun to understand. And for the first time since walking out of that wedding hall, I felt something new. Relief. I wasn't mourning the loss of a future with Sophia. I was grateful that I had escaped it before it was too late. Back in the city, Kevin was still watching in the fallout unfold. He had been keeping tabs on everything, Sophia, Margaret, the media storm, and when he called me the next evening, I knew he had something important to say. "You're not going to believe this," he said. The moment I picked up, I leaned against the porch railing. "Try me. Margaret's at it again." He said, "Sheik's been publicly blaming you for everything, saying you're the reason Sophia's suffering, that you were too weak to handle the pressures of marriage." I smirked. Of course she is. She even went on that morning show, you know, the one with the fake happy hosts, and did this whole dramatic speech about how you abandoned her daughter in her time of need. "Let me guess," I said. "She made herself the victim too." Kevin let out a humorless laugh. "Bingo," she actually said, and I quote, "I treated him like my own son, and this is how he repays us." I shook my head. Unbelievable. Margaret was a master at manipulating narratives. She had twisted the truth so well that some people were actually buying into it. I could already imagine the pity comments online. "Poor Sophia, no woman deserves to be left at the altar like that. He could have at least handled it in private. A real man would have stayed and worked things out." People were quick to forget that Sophia had been the one who publicly humiliated me. Check. Trying to force a response out of you. Kevin said she wants you to break your silence. Not happening. I said, because I knew exactly what Margaret was doing. She wanted me to react. She wanted me to play into her game to defend myself, so she could twist my words and control the narrative. But I wasn't playing anymore. "She's going to regret this," I said, my voice calm. Kevin paused. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer immediately, because at that moment something became very clear. Margaret thought she still had power. She thought that by going public, by making me the villain, she could pressure me into coming back. But she had underestimated me, and soon enough she was going to learn the truth. I wasn't just done with Sophia. I was done letting anyone control my life. Margaret wanted to play dirty. The more I thought about it, the more it all made sense. Sophia's sudden desperation, the way she had flooded my phone with texts trying to reach me, The way Margaret had launched a public smear campaign spinning the story in her favor. It wasn't just about the humiliation. It was about power. And more importantly, it was about money. Margaret wasn't the type of woman who would care about love or personal shame. She wasn't crying herself to sleep over my absence from Sophia's life. No, this was about something bigger. I called Kevin back, pacing the wooden deck of my villa. He picked up on the first ring. "Tell me everything," I said. "Everything you've heard. Don't leave anything out." Kevin hesitated, then sighed. "All right, but don't say I didn't warn you." I listened in silence as he laid it all out. It turned out that Margaret's empire was crumbling. The family's wealth, once untouchable, once secure, was hanging by a thread. Margaret had kept up appearances for years, but behind closed doors, things had been falling apart. They had been burning through money trying to keep their status intact. And my wedding to Sophia, it wasn't just a marriage. It was a business move. People talking, Kevin continued. There are rumors that they were counting on the wedding to save them. Some sort of business deal was supposed to go through once you two got married. But when you walked away, it all fell apart. I clenched my jaw. "What kind of deal?" "No one knows for sure," he admitted. "But whatever it was big. And now investors are pulling out. Companies are backing away from their partnerships. The whole thing is crashing, man." I let out a slow breath, so that was the real reason behind their panic. It wasn't just about the scandal. It was about survival. Sophia's texts, her desperate attempts to reach me, weren't about love or regret. She wasn't mourning me. She was trying to fix the mess her family was in. I should have been angry. I should have been furious that they had tried to use me as a pawn. But instead I felt something else entirely. Satisfaction. Because, for the first time in my life, I had the upper hand. For years I had felt like an outsider in their world, welcomed but not respected. I had been treated like a guest in my own relationship, someone who had to prove his worth to be accepted. And now they were the ones losing everything, and I wasn't lifting a single finger to stop it. Meanwhile, back in the city, Sophia sat in the dimly lit study of her family's mansion, her hands trembling as she stared at the financial reports in front of her. Numbers. She didn't understand reports filled with terms she had never cared to learn. But one thing was clear. They were drowning. Her mother had tried to cover it up, pretending that everything was fine. But she knew the truth. Now the business deal had collapsed. The moment I left, their investors had seen the public humiliation, the scandal, and had decided that they wanted no part of it. And now the empire Margaret had spent years building was on the verge of collapse. Sophia felt sick, not just because of the financial ruin, but because she had let this happen. She had let herself become a puppet, a tool in her mother's ambitions. She had never questioned why her mother was so invested in the wedding. She had never asked why everything had to be so grand, so extravagant. She had assumed it was just her mother being her mother, but now she realized the truth. Her mother had never cared about her happiness. She had cared about control, about money, about power. And when I had walked away, it had all come crashing down. She reached for her phone, her fingers hovering over my name. I still hadn't answered a single call. I had ignored every text, every voicemail, every attempt she had made to fix this, and for the first time she wondered if maybe I never would. Maybe I had meant it when I left. Maybe, just maybe, she had truly lost me forever. A tear slipped down her cheek. She had never known what it felt like to lose until now. Back at my villa, Kevin's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "So what now?" he asked. I stared out at the dark ocean, my grip tightening around my phone. I do nothing, I said. Kevin paused. You're really going to let them burn? Yes, I said simply because. Why should I save them? They had used me, played me, humiliated me. Now they could deal with the consequences. Kevin let out a low chuckle. Damn. Remind me never to get on your bad side. I smirked. Too late for that. And with that, I ended the call. The night was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time since everything had fallen apart, I felt something close to closure. I should have known better than to answer the phone. The moment I saw the number flashing on my screen, Sophia, I hesitated. I had ignored her calls for weeks, let every single message go unanswered, made it clear that I was done. But something about this call felt different. Maybe it was the fact that she hadn't tried in a few days. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe, deep down, I just wanted to hear what excuse she would try next. So, like an idiot, I answered the moment her voice came through the speaker. I regretted it. She sounded broken, Nate. Her voice was barely a whisper hoarse, like she had been crying for hours. Please, I need to see you one last time. I exhaled sharply, the audacity. Why, my voice was cold, distant. I refused to let her hear anything else, because I need to fix this. She said, sniffling. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but I don't want this to be how we end. I stayed silent. You don't even have to talk, she added quickly. Just let me see you. Just for a few minutes. It was a mistake. I knew it. But against my better judgment, I said, fine, a list. Mistake. A big one. The setup she chose? A high-end restaurant in the heart of the city, one we had gone to many times before, the kind of place where the wealthy dined, where every table had a white tablecloth and the waiters dressed better than most people I should have known. Something was off the moment I arrived. The atmosphere wasn't normal. There was a certain buzz in the air, something scripted, something rehearsed. And then I saw them. Reporters. They were scattered throughout the restaurant, dressed as casual diners but holding cameras, pretending to sip on expensive cocktails while stealing glances in my direction. I clenched my jaw. Sophia, she had set me up before I could even turn around to leave. I heard her voice. Nate. I turned. She stood at the entrance, dressed deliberately, soft curls, a long, elegant dress, makeup that made her look pale and fragile, like a woman who had been through hell, like the perfect victim she took a few shaky steps toward me, her eyes welling up with perfectly timed tears. And suddenly every reporter in the restaurant pulled out their cameras. Flash, click, flash. The whole thing was a trap. The show I should have left. I should have turned around, walked out, ignored whatever desperate performance she had planned. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed. Because if she thought she could control the narrative again, if she thought she could make me look like the heartless man who abandoned her, then she had another thing coming. So I let her put on her little act. She stepped closer, letting out a soft SOB, just loud enough for the cameras to pick up. I never wanted it to end like this, she said, just above a whisper, her hands trembling. Flash. I was stupid, she continued, her voice cracking. I let my emotions get the best of me. I pushed you away and I lost you. The reporters were eating it up to them. This was gold. The broken bride, the betrayed lover, the tragic reunion. I didn't react. I didn't comfort her. I didn't give them what they wanted. Instead, I tilted my head slightly, my expression unreadable. So this is what you wanted. Sophia blinked rapidly, like she hadn't expected me to call her out in front of her carefully placed audience. What was she whispered? This. I gestured around, my voice casual, the show, the cameras, the scripted reunion. Whispers filled the restaurant. The reporter shifted uncomfortably. Sophia's carefully rehearsed vulnerability cracked. "Nate," she started, her voice shaky. "Now, for real." I cut her off. "You didn't want to see me." I said simply, "You wanted an audience." I turned to one of the cameras and gave them a mocking smirk. "Well, congratulations." I continued, my voice dripping with amusement. "You got it." The flashes slowed. Some of the so-called dining guests shifted in their seats, their cover blown. Sophia's face turned pale. "Nate, please," she begged, stepping forward. I took a step back. "You want a story?" I asked. "Fine. Let me give you one." I grabbed the microphone from the nearby musician, whose eyes went wide with confusion. The restaurant was so silent now that you could hear the clicking of cameras. I turned to the crow. "Since we're all here for a story, Ledin, tell the truth." I said, my voice steady, loud, commanding. Sophia's breath hitched. I gestured toward her, this woman. She didn't come here to apologize. She came here to save face. Gasps. A few people exchanged looks. She doesn't miss me. I continued, my voice calm but cutting. She misses the security. I gave her the protection, the money, the power. And now that it's gone, now that she's lost everything, she wants me to be the solution. Sophia's hands clenched at her sides. "Nate, stop it," she whispered. But I wasn't stopping. "She doesn't love me." I said she loves control, and when she lost it, she tried to trap me in a public spectacle. The restaurant was dead silent. Sophia's lip trembled, her entire plan falling apart. And for the final blow, I turned to her, my voice dropping just low enough for only her to hear. "You lost me, the moment you slapped me, Sophia." I said coldly, "You lost me forever." I dropped the mic, and I walked out head high, completely, utterly free. The night air was crisp. As I stepped out of the restaurant, my pulse steady, my heart not even racing. I had expected Sophia to try something, but I hadn't thought she'd be this desperate. A public setup, a staged reunion, pathetic. As I walked toward my car, I could hear the commotion inside. Reporters scrambling, Sophia crying murmurs of shock, rippling through the restaurant like an earthquake. I imagine the headlines. Groom exposes bride's public stunt in brutal mic drop moment. The slap. Wedding takes another shocking turn. Ex-fiancé humiliates Sophia in front of press. Not so innocent. Sophia's public apology backfires as her ex calls out her true intentions. I smirked. She played herself. She had wanted a story, a way to shift public sympathy back in her favor. But instead, I had given everyone the truth, and the truth was ugly. I reached my car, opened the door and sat inside. My hands gripped the steering wheel for a moment as I let out a slow breath. This time, there was no rage, no sadness, no regret. Just satisfaction. For the first time since that slap, I wasn't running from the situation. I had stood my ground, faced it head-on, and turned the tables on her. Sophia was done, and she knew it. Inside the restaurant, Sophia stood frozen, her face pale, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The whispers were deafening. People were staring, some shaking their heads, some filming, some just watching, waiting for her next move. Her plan had backfired spectacularly. Margaret had told her that if she could get me to meet her, if she could just make herself look fragile, broken, and apologetic in front of the press, people would pity her. They would turn against me, paint me as the cold-hearted ex who abandoned his bride. But instead I had exposed her. She could still hear my words playing over and over in her head. She doesn't love me. She loves control. She doesn't miss me. She misses what I gave her. She lost me forever. Her vision blurred as she swallowed back a sob. How had this happened? She had been so sure that I would at least entertain the idea of reconciliation, that I would still have feelings for her even after everything. But the way I had looked at her tonight like a stranger, like someone he barely recognized, that was when she knew I was really gone. And the worst part, the cameras had captured everything. Margaret's fury. The door slammed so hard the house shook. Margaret stormed into the grand sitting room of the family estate, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunfire. Sophia followed behind her shoulders, slumped, her face still wet with tears. She had failed. She had failed miserably, and her mother was furious. "You humiliated yourself," Margaret hissed, pacing in front of the fireplace. "You humiliated this family." Sophia flinched. "I was just trying to what?" Margaret snapped, turning on her with fire in her eyes. "Trying to make him come back, trying to get public sympathy. You just made yourself look like a desperate fool." Sophia winced. She had never seen her mother this angry before. Margaret had always been calculating, controlled, cold, but never explosive. But tonight everything had crumbled. Sophia shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought, no, you didn't, Margaret." Cut her off, her voice sharp as a knife. "If you had thought, you would have realized that Nathan is not some weak little boy who can be manipulated." Sophia felt sick. She had always known her mother was ruthless, that she saw people as tools rather than human beings. But now for the first time, she was realizing that she had been one of those tools all along. Her own mother had never cared about her happiness. She had cared about winning. Margaret's fists clenched. "We need to fix this." Sophia stared at her. "Fix what? It's over." Margaret's eyes darkened. "Nothing is over until I say it's over." Sophia's stomach twisted. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had never felt toward her mother before. Fear. The aftermath. I knew I had made the right decision when my phone started buzzing non-stop the next morning. Kevin was the first to call. "Dude," he started already laughing. "Have you checked Twitter?" I hadn't, but when I did, I nearly burst out laughing myself. Desperate Bride is trending worldwide. Sophia's failed attempt to trap her ex backfires in spectacular fashion. Video of the brutal mic drop moment has over 10 million views. In 12 hours, I scrolled through the comments, shaking my head at to spill. That man didn't just reject her. He rejected her, exposed her, and walked out like a king. That no more red flags. If a woman slaps you in front of 300 people, just know she's capable of worse. At Savage Life, imagine thinking a whole man would crawl back after being publicly humiliated. Be serious at CEU winning. I need Nathan to teach a masterclass on knowing your worth. Face with tears of joy. Face with tears of joy. I set my phone down, exhaling. The world had finally seen her for what she was, but more importantly, she had seen it too. For the first time, Sophia was the one being shamed, the one being mocked, the one who had to watch her reputation go up in flames the way she had tried to set mine on fire. I had won, and this time there was no coming back from it. Margaret was not a woman who accepted defeat. Even after the public disaster of Sophia's staged reconciliation attempt, she refused to back down. In her mind, she had spent too many years, too much effort, and too much money molding her daughter into the perfect image of power, wealth, and prestige. She would not allow it to crumble. And if that meant destroying me in the process, then so be it. The lawsuit. Kevin was the one who called me first, his voice brimming with disbelief. "Bro, have you seen the news?" I had just finished a morning run along the coast, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. But the moment he said those words, I knew Margaret was making her next move. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the news app. And there it was. Breaking Sophia and her family file lawsuit against X-Room for emotional distress. Margaret's statement. Nathan's actions have caused severe psychological damage to my daughter. He humiliated her in front of the world, abandoned her at the altar, and ruined her future. We are seeking justice. Justice. I almost laughed. This wasn't about justice. This was revenge. I scrolled further, shaking my head as I read through the legal claim they were suing me for millions, claiming I had intentionally caused Sophia public harm, saying that my actions had led to financial losses for their family. It was ridiculous. But I also knew exactly what they were trying to do. They didn't expect to win. They just wanted to drain me, tie me up in court battles, force me to waste time and money. While Margaret worked to repair her daughter's image, I clenched my jaw. They wanted a war. Fine, I would give them one. The evidence that ended it. I made one phone call, just one, to the security team at the wedding venue. "I need the footage," I said simply. It didn't take long for them to. "Send it over, every camera angle, every second of that night, and in perfect high definition." Clarity. There, it was Margaret demanding my seat, Sophia slapping me in front of everyone. The guest, horrified reactions. Me, walking away calm, composed, without a single act of retaliation. I had been quiet for weeks. I had let them talk, let them spin their narrative, let them try to frame me as the villain. But now it was my turn. The public response. I didn't need a press conference. I didn't need a carefully worded statement. I didn't need to argue or defend myself. I just released the footage, and then I let the internet do the rest. Scandal alert. OH my God. Nathan just dropped the full uncut video, and Sophia's case is dead on arrival. The slap wedding at Lawyer Up. The lawsuit is literally DOA. This footage proves Sophia and Margaret were the aggressors. She slapped him on camera. Case dismissed. Reality check. So they tried to sue him for emotional distress after she humiliated him on his wedding day. The audacity. No more lies, ladies and gentlemen. We just witnessed the fastest self-destruction of a reputation in history. Within hours, their case fell apart. Even the media, who had been giving Sophia sympathy interviews, flipped their stance. Overnight, reporters turned on her, talk show hosts mocked her. Legal experts laughed at the lawsuit, and just like that, Sophia and Margaret went from being the victims of a tragic heartbreak to being exposed for what they really were. Manipulative, controlling, and desperate. They tried to trap me in a legal battle. Instead, they destroyed themselves. Margaret's breakdown. No one had seen or heard from Margaret in days after the footage leaked, until she made one last appearance. A televised interview, and, for the first time, she wasn't composed. She wasn't elegant. She wasn't the powerful, untouchable woman she had always pretended to be. She was angry, bitter, defensive. "They don't understand," she snapped at the interviewer. "Nathan is the one who abandoned my daughter. We were blindsided." The host cut her off. "But ma'am, the video footage shows Sophia slapping him first." Margaret's jaw tightened and she spat. It was a moment of frustration. She was overwhelmed. The host tilted his head. "So, you believe it's acceptable for a woman to slap her husband to be in front of hundreds of people?" Margaret blinked rapidly. The audience wasn't on her side anymore, and she knew it. For the first time in her entire life, she had lost control, and it was killing her. The final collapse. By the end of the week, the lawsuit was dropped. Sophia and Margaret vanished from public view, their business struggling, their reputation in ruins, and me. For the first time in years, I was finally free. No more expectations, no more controlling in-laws, no more being second place in my own relationship. I had walked away from what could have been the biggest mistake of my life, and as I sat back on my villa's porch watching the sunset over the ocean, I realized something. I wasn't just free. I had one. The silence that followed the lawsuit's collapse was almost unsettling. For weeks, Sophia and Margaret had dominated the headlines, painting me as the villain, orchestrating a desperate attempt to salvage their reputation and finally filing a lawsuit that crashed and burned before it even started. And now nothing. No interviews, no public appearances, no statements. It was as if they had vanished overnight. I should have felt relief, and I did, but a part of me knew Margaret wasn't done yet, because people like her never accept defeat. They just find new ways to strike Sophia's betrayal. I didn't hear from Sophia for nearly 2 weeks, until one evening Kevin called me with news that nearly made me drop my phone. "You're not going to believe this," he said. I leaned against the kitchen counter, a glass of whiskey in my hand. At this point, I'll believe anything. Kevin let out a dry laugh. "All right, get this. Sophia just did an exclusive interview." I froze. "She did what?" "She went on some high-profile talk show." Kevin continued, and she threw her mother under the bus. I set my drink down and my grip tightening around the glass. "Explain," Kevin exhaled. "She didn't just betray Margaret. She annihilated her." I grabbed the remote and switched on the TV quickly, searching for the interview. And there she was, Sophia, sitting across from a well-known journalist. Her eyes red, rimmed, her voice soft and broken, playing the role of the wounded woman to perfection. "Host, you've been silent for weeks, Sophia." "Why speak out now, Sophia?" "Because I can't live like this anymore." The audience leaned in. "Host, live like what, Sophia?" Deep breath. "Under my mother's control." There it was, the moment Sophia turned on the very woman who had shaped her life. I watched, arms crossed, as she painted herself as a victim of Margaret, of expectations of a world that had forced her into a role she never wanted. "Sophia, I let my mother dictate my choices. I let her push away the man I love." Tears well up, and it's my biggest regret. I scoffed. The performance was flawless. This wasn't a confession. This was damage control. She had realized Margaret was dead weight, so she had cut her loose, throwing her own mother to the wolves to save herself. And the worst part? It was working Margaret's downfall. The public turned against Margaret overnight. For years, she had been seen as a powerful, respected businesswoman. But now she was a controlling, manipulative mother who had ruined her own daughter's life. New headlines surfaced. Margaret's reign of control. The real story behind the slap wedding? Sophia breaks free from toxic mother. What's next for her? Margaret used her own daughter for power. Experts say, suddenly, no one wanted to be associated with her. Business partners distanced themselves. Former allies cut ties, and then the final blow landed. Margaret's company officially declared bankruptcy. That was it? The end? The empire she had built burned to the ground. And Sophia? She walked away untouched, her hands clean, or at least that's what she wanted people to believe. Her last attempt, a week after the interview, Sophia showed up at my doorstep. I heard the knock late at night, slow, hesitant. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was for a long moment. I just stood there debating whether I should even open the door. But I did, and there she was, Sophia. She looked different. Not the perfectly put-together woman I had once known. Not the arrogant, entitled bride who had slapped me in front of hundreds of people. She looked defeated. Her hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail. She wore no makeup, just an oversized sweater and jeans. There were dark circles under her eyes, and for the first time, she looked real. "Nate," she whispered. I didn't respond. She swallowed hard. "Can I come in?" I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because I need to say something, and this time it's not for the cameras." I studied her face. I didn't trust her, not anymore, but for some reason I stepped aside. She walked in, looking around as if expecting something familiar, but this wasn't her space anymore. It never would be again. She turned to face me, exhaling shakily. "I meant what I said in the interview." She began about my mother, about realizing how much control she had over me. I stayed silent. She took another step forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "I loved you." The words should have meant something, should have stirred some kind of emotion, but they didn't, because I knew better now. "No, you didn't," I said simply. Her lips parted. "Nate, you loved what I represented." I cut her off. "You loved the stability, the power, the way I fit into the image your mother wanted." She blinked rapidly, tears forming. "That's not true." "Yes, it is," I said, my voice calm, steady, absolute. "And now that she's gone, you think I'll be here to pick up the pieces." Her shoulders trembled. "I just want another chance." I stared at her for a long moment, and then I laughed softly. At first, then harder, because the audacity, the sheer, unbelievable audacity. "You're unbelievable," I said, shaking my head. She flinched. "Nate, no," I interrupted, my voice cold. "You don't get to rewrite history. You don't get to act like you weren't just as bad as her." A single tear slipped down her cheek. "I regret it," she whispered. "I regret everything." I nodded. "Good, you should." Her lips parted, but before she could say another word, I reached for the door and held it open. Her breath hitched. "You're really done with me." I met her gaze, and for the first time in our entire relationship, I felt nothing. "No, Sophia," I said. "I was done the moment you slapped me." And then I shut the door in her face for the final time. The moment I shut the door, I stood there for a few seconds listening. I expected her to knock again, to plead, to try one last time to convince me that there was something left to salvage. But the hallway was silent. No more desperate whispers. No more attempts to justify the unjustifiable. Then slowly I heard the soft shuffle of her footsteps as she walked away. That was it. The end. And yet, for a long time I just stood there. Not because I regretted my decision. I didn't. Not because I felt guilty. I didn't. But because I knew that, for the first time in her life, Sophia was truly alone. No mother to fight her battles. No fiancé to be her shield. No wealth, no influence. No name that carried any weight. She had spent years living in a world where consequences didn't exist, where, no matter how reckless, spoiled, or cruel she was, someone would always clean up the mess. But this was a mess too big to fix, and for once, she had to deal with it on her own. I exhaled slowly, turning away from the door and walking into the living room. I picked up my glass of whiskey from the table, staring at the dark amber liquid before taking a slow sip. I had thought that closure would feel different, that there would be some grand moment where everything inside me clicked into place. But really it was quiet, a simple realization. I had one, not just against Sophia, not just against Margaret. I had one against the life I had almost walked into. A life where I would have always been second. A life where I would have compromised my own self-respect just to keep a woman who never truly saw me as her equal. And now I was free. Sophia's last moment of denial. Sophia walked through the empty streets, her arms wrapped around herself, numb. She had always imagined that if she ever lost me, it would be on her terms, that she would be the one to walk away, to move on first to find someone better. But instead, I had closed the door on her. Literally. And for the first time, she understood what it felt like. To be disposable, to be rejected, to have someone look at you and feel nothing at all. Her mind raced with excuses, justifications, delusions, anything to soften the reality that was pressing down on her chest. He still loves me. He's just being stubborn. He'll come back. He has to. Men always come back. But deep down, under all the denial, she knew the truth. I wasn't coming back, ever. I had made my choice, and this time I wasn't the one losing something. She was. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, staring at the blank screen. No texts, no calls, nothing. I had erased her from my life, and that was when it finally hit her. This wasn't just a breakup. This was a consequence, the first real consequence she had ever faced. And the worst part, there was no one left to blame. Margaret's final fall. 2 weeks after Sophia's final attempt to get me back, Margaret's empire officially collapsed. Her name was in the news again, but not in the way she wanted. Margaret's luxury empire declares bankruptcy. Former business mogul falls from grace, from power to ruin. How one family lost everything in just 3 months. Margaret speaks out. I was betrayed by my own daughter. I wasn't surprised. Margaret had burned too many bridges, used too many people, manipulated too many situations, and eventually she had nothing left to bargain with. Her power had always been built on perception, and once the world saw her for who she truly was, the foundation crumbled. I heard rumors that she had fled the city, moving somewhere quiet, away from the cameras, the critics, the investors who once kissed the ground she walked on. But I didn't care. Margaret was no longer my problem, and neither was her daughter moving forward. One morning I woke up and realized something strange. I hadn't thought about Sophia in days. Not in anger, not in regret, not in nostalgia. She had simply faded, and that was how I knew without a doubt that I was finally done with that chapter of my life. I packed my bags, left the resort I had been staying in, and booked a flight to Europe, not to escape, not to run, but because I wanted to go. For the first time in a long time, I was making a choice for myself. No expectations, no obligations, just me. I stepped onto the plane feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Excitement, possibility, freedom. And as the city disappeared beneath the clouds, I smiled because I wasn't looking back anymore. I was looking forward to a new life, to new beginnings, and to a future where I would never again settle for anything less than I deserved.